Hello everyone and welcome back to A Dancer's Mindset with myself, Isabella. Today is a super exciting episode because we're interviewing a very, very special guest and I am so thrilled she agreed to come on the podcast. It is none other than Misty Copeland. Now, Misty was the first African-American woman to become a principal dancer of ABT, breaking boundaries in more ways than one. She spent a long time battling the stereotype of what a ballet dancer should look like. And she's gone on to become not only a principal dancer, but also an amazing public figure, bringing more awareness to ballet and making it more accessible to people who never deemed it possible to be involved in this industry. She's a huge inspiration to us all, and I couldn't be more thrilled that she's decided to come on the podcast today. So everyone, let's meet Misty.
To find new ways of interpreting a role or enjoying the process. And I think there's something beautiful about that challenge. Cynthia immediately said, I think you're a prodigy. Dancers of color have to work twice as hard. What I wanted was bigger than myself. For me, it felt like being at ABT was the way to do that.
So hi, Misty. Thank you so much for joining me today. Like I say, it's a huge honor, and I know my followers are going to be absolutely thrilled that you've come on the podcast. I wanted to start early on. So you started late to ballet. And how old are you when you started, and what inspired you to start in the first place?
Yeah. So I had no exposure to ballet at all. I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and moved to the Los Angeles area when I was 2 years old. There was a lot of music in my household. My mom was constantly playing a range of music, but there was no classical music. I didn't hear classical music until I was 13 years old when I started ballet. But I would say it was music that really motivated me to want to explore movement and explore, what that meant like in my body. So I would say around the age of like 7, I started to create and choreograph. And that was not based on seeing an organized, dance genre or anything. It was just something I had in my imagination and in my head. When I heard music, I wanted to express myself through movement. So it was because of that love of music and then wanting to create and choreograph that I decided I would audition for the dance team when I was about 12 and a half. So that was really the first that I ever kind of put myself out there, expressing myself through movement. And I was made captain of the team, which was a shock to my entire family because I was so shy and so introverted that they couldn't believe I would even put myself out there and audition, not just for the dance team, but for the captain position. So that's kind of where my world's it changed and dance became such a big focus in it. And then at 13 years old was when I found ballet at the community center I was attending after school at the Boys and Girls Club. So that was where I took my first ballet class at 13.
Amazing. I really resonate you already when you talk about music, because it wasn't seeing a ballet for me that made me start at all. My dad used to play, it was classical music. It was The Rite of Spring, quite dramatic, before school. And so I used to go into the lounge and then try to, the bum, 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 bum. I used to try to bounce on the beat and just really loved music. And that was when I really felt something in my soul want to express it through body. And that came to me way before actually thinking, I can actually go to a ballet class and do this and learn how to do it. So that's really interesting. So when you started ballet more seriously, you met Cindy, your teacher?
Yes.
Yeah. And tell me more about her and your journey with Cindy.
Yeah, so it was through an incredible program, and I'm in the midst of starting my own foundation, really built around this similar, built around my experience, but to be able to bring access to communities that don't have it.
Yeah.
And it was through a program exactly what I'm making now, that I was discovered, I guess you could say. But there is a local ballet teacher, Cynthia Bradley, in my small town of San Pedro, California. And she was giving this ballet program through the Boys and Girls Club, through the community center I was attending with my 5 siblings, because I'm one of 6 children. And it was a safe place for us to be at after school while my mother was working many jobs. So Cynthia wanted to find more diverse students to bring into her school on scholarship. That was the goal of this program at the Boys and Girls Club. And the first class I ever took was on a basketball court, and I was in my gym clothes. And Cynthia immediately said, I think you're a prodigy. I've never seen anyone be able to absorb the information and hold on to it. And then my body was capable of doing everything she asked me to do. And, within weeks, Cynthia brought me into her school on full scholarship. And then I ended up living with her and her family for the 3 years. Which was a difficult decision for my mother to make, but we just
Yeah.
didn't have the means. My mom didn't have a car. We didn't have a way for me to get back and forth from
Mm.
the ballet class. My mom had 5 other children that she was taking care of, and her priority was getting us to school and keeping food on the table and a roof over our heads. So it was a really difficult time, which is so interesting, I think.
Yeah.
That when ballet came into my life, we were probably at the lowest point in our family dynamic. My mother had just divorced for the 4th time, and we were living in a motel. We didn't have a home.
Yeah.
Um, and
So
so,
Cindy kind of saved you in a way.
yes, I would say that Cindy, as well as ballet,
Yeah.
uh, it gave me a sense of purpose
Mm.
and focus and meaning in a way that I'd never experienced,
Yeah.
and a voice to be able to express myself in a way that, being a middle child and one of 6 children, and not always feeling secure and
Yeah.
safe
Yeah.
in my, life experience, ballet gave me that, and Cynthia as well.
Yeah. And your mother letting you go, probably she saw, even though how difficult that must have been, sure saw that this was an opportunity to give you a life, like a real amazing
Absolutely.
life. And that says something about your mum. I mean, that's amazing. Um, so now, then you went to Cindy, and when was the first moment that you realized yourself, obviously as a young girl, that you had something special here and you had talent for ballet? Did you
You
already
know,
know this at that time?
I mean, I never believed the people around me who would say
No,
things
I don't
to
think we
me.
ever do.
Right. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
Cindy was telling me, you're a prodigy. And, for me, I I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed the work. I loved being in the studio. I loved being on
yeah,
stage more. So it was never even about whether or not I was good, or
no,
but I was given an opportunity, and I wanted to, do as much as I could with it. I don't think that it probably wasn't until I went away to my first summer program that I then started to understand. I think when I was being measured next to other dancers from
mm,
all parts of the world, San Francisco Ballet was where I went my very first summer. And I'd only been dancing for like a year and a half or something.
that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was terrifying, to be in a different atmosphere. Ballet, what I knew was this tiny little studio in the
Yeah,
city that I lived in. And it was the first time that I was, surrounded by other dancers that were at a high level. I think it was probably there, they put me in the highest level of the summer intensive, even though I still was learning vocabulary. I still didn't know what I was doing really, but I was
Yeah.
good at mimicking. I could visually see something and hold on to it,
I think
copy.
that's really important, actually, to be a successful well, also a very sort of good student, is to be able to look at your teacher and then just like apply it instantly.
Apply it. Yeah, it helped me to I moved forward very rapidly, but there's no shortcuts in ballet. So I didn't have, the stamina and just what's built over years and years of repetition
Mm,
and having an understanding of taking on a character, all of these things when you're performing.
yeah.
But I think it was there at San Francisco that was the first time that I think I understood my natural ability, but it
Yeah.
also made me aware of how much more work I needed to do.
Yeah. I think the first time, like again, I really get it, because I also fell in love with the hard work. And when I was 9, I was introduced to my first Russian coach, and she
Oh,
was
yeah.
like slapping my feet and like shouting at me and almost making me cry. But I was like, God, like I'm really like sweating, and like I don't think I've ever been so red. And then I just kind of got obsessed with the hard work, rather than, I wasn't even thinking about performing or anything. I was just like, I really enjoy working towards something and like being good at something, and
Right.
like having someone say, yeah, you've got it, well done, um more than anything else. And so yeah, I really understand. I want to fast forward now to when you then joined ABT,
Mhm.
and obviously coming from a small studio and doing a few summer intensives, that must have been a shock.
Yeah.
And was that sort of a bit of a culture shock and hard to get used to? Like, how did your body cope with the regimen? And did you feel behind on anything technically?
Oh, yeah. So I trained for 4 years before I moved to New York City and joined American Ballet Theater's studio company.
Right.
So it was very fast and it was a lot of, it was a big adjustment. So my first summer in New York City, that was really difficult on my body, being in point shoes for, I guess it was probably like 5 or 6 hours a day, which
Yeah.
now that's like nothing. But then as a young person, that was a lot on my body. And then changing between different genres and types of movement, which you tend to do in summer intensives, doing exploring modern dance and character dance and uh, more contemporary ballet, was a lot for my body to take on. But
Mm,
um, it was extremely difficult once I got, I think, into the company.
yeah.
Uh, when I was in the studio company, things move at an easier pace, and they kind of adapt to. There's only 6 girls and 6 boys in the studio company, and
Right.
small touring group, and they're a little more accommodating and kind of nurturing you. And then after a year in the studio company, I was thrust into the company. And I think that's when it really hit me how many holes I still had in my technique. And again, stamina that, I at that point had only been dancing for 5 years. And
Hmm. Hmm.
it's not a lot of experience under my belt. And it was just being able to hold on to the technique throughout a 4-act ballet like Swan Lake, that was really revealing for me when I joined the company. But again, uh, Kevin McKenzie, the artistic, well, now about to be former artistic
Yeah.
director of ABT, was always such a big support for me. And even though there were people in the artistic staff that over the years were not always the most open in terms of the diversity,
Yeah.
me the Black woman in the company for the first decade of my career.
Mm.
But Kevin was always had an understanding of, I think, my potential and talent and what it meant to have a black woman in the company. And I think that was really helpful to have his support and guidance throughout my career, especially in those beginning years.
Yeah. I remember seeing in an interview somewhere, you mentioning that you had a meeting with Kevin, and then you had to explain that, I actually have to work a lot harder than everyone else, and that maybe he didn't quite understand that initially. And I thought to myself, obviously you had big obstacles, but even myself as a very tall dancer, especially in England, I felt, again, that was a huge obstacle. And it's kind of like you have to work doubly hard and almost be better than everyone else. And, did you feel that, and how did you cope with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I don't fault someone like Kevin in his position, and being in an atmosphere in a career where that's not something that's acknowledged. For people, dancers who are different, especially when you're like in an elite company and you're expected to look a certain way, and most dancers do. Whether they're a certain height, have a certain body type, background, whatever it is. But I've always felt that it was important for me to have an open communication and dialogue with my artistic director, to have an understanding of where I was coming from. And it wasn't that I wanted things to be easier for me, or I don't know.
No,
It
you
was
just
more,
wanted to kind of open the door
yeah,
because the door was
yeah.
closed.
Exactly. And have an understanding of, for future dancers of color to
Yeah.
come into the company, of what the experience is and what needs to be changed and adjusted. And when I said to him that dancers of color, Black dancers in particular, Black women, have to work twice as hard. It's not as simple as just the work that's being done in the studio. But
No.
yes, you have to have talent at a different level just to get your foot in the door to
Yeah.
these companies. But it's about what you're dealing with on a daily basis in the studio and outside of the studio, especially here in the United States.
Yeah.
Of being Black, being brown, whether it's something that people are conscious of, it's the language that's being used, it's maybe the unconscious biases that people have. I spent the first couple of years in my career, the artistic staff questioning whether or not I should be on stage in the Ballet Blanc, in the white
Yeah.
ballets.
I mean, that's
and
terrible.
these things take a toll on you, and I don't think people
Of
understand
course.
the effects that it can have, especially on a young person. When you enter a company, you don't necessarily have mentors and guidance built into that atmosphere.
No, and I think you must have felt extremely isolated and quite alone for a long time. And, throughout that period, whilst you were sort of trying to battle these boundaries, was there a moment when you thought about giving up or quitting?
So many times. And this isn't a unique to dancers of color.
No,
I know that dancers in
I've probably
general,
thought about it nearly every day.
it's a
Yeah.
difficult career, and I think that it takes a lot of strength and perseverance, but it also takes having a support system, and we don't
Of
always have that
course.
built in the ballet community. I think we've grown a bit, but I mean, I've now been a professional for over 20 years and definitely didn't have it 20 years ago. But it's really been just about having that support, because it is very isolating. And it took having other dancers of color in the company with me. They were mostly men,
Yeah.
to really be able to feel comforted in having that back and forth dialogue when you don't have anyone else that
Mm.
can relate to you.
Like Eric Underwood was a close friend of yours, wasn't he?
Yes, Eric
Yeah.
was, just to have someone who you can look at and maybe not even have to say anything to, and they understand the journey of what it is you're experiencing.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's important uh, to highlight the need and necessity for mentors in young dancers' lives, and
Absolutely.
whether that's it doesn't have to be people that are in the company with you. They can
Mm.
be people outside of, and they don't have to be ballet dancers either. That's really, I think, been the strength behind me throughout my journey, is accepting and acknowledging mentors that come into your life that can just be a support system, a sounding board, people that can give you advice on communication with your elders, or people that you work under, or your peers. I think it's all really beneficial to have.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast in a way, because I wanted to help a lot of dancers, because having gone through all these feelings myself, like a lot of dancers have, the self-doubt, the turmoil, the low
Yeah.
self-esteem, imposter syndrome, all that stuff.
So happy
Uh,
that you're doing this, because
yeah,
so many people do feel discouraged, um, and for me, going back to your question, which I veered off, but I wanted to quit many times.
yeah.
And I think it's important to have, people there to support you, so that you don't kind of push over the edge, or get to a point where you're losing sight of what it is you're doing and why. And I think for me, there were times when I just felt so isolated and alone
Yeah.
before I had all of these mentors in my life. And I thought about, quitting dance, or joining Dance Studio of Harlem, joining a company where I felt like I would be supported, and I would have people surrounding me that looked like me. But in the end, my goal was always to dance for ABT, and I had to have, people outside that were helping me to see that, what I wanted was bigger than myself. And I think that to be able to create change and bring more diversity to ballet, for me, it felt like being at ABT was the way to do that.
Yeah, I read about that actually, and I thought to myself, even though that would have been an amazing opportunity for you, did you think in a way that that would almost be like accepting defeat? Like you can't break that boundary that should be broken, and that I need to do this not just for me, but for all the future ballerinas, even though that's an amazing opportunity. That's not my dream. And why shouldn't I have
Right?
that dream come true? Why not? You know?
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that Dance Studio of Harlem is such an important, entity that
Mm,
has needed to exist and has given
of course.
jobs to generations of Black and Brown dancers. But like you said, for me, my goal was always American Ballet Theater. It was their repertoire, it was their history, it was all of these things that I wanted to be a part of, and to have that dream be deferred because, I felt like I would be more accepted in another space. I didn't feel, stopping and really thinking about the bigger picture, it didn't feel like that was big enough to stop me.
Yeah.
So, but again, it was having support. And once I just made that decision to stay on that route, having a strong support system behind me that was going to continue to remind me on those days when you just feel like you can't do it alone.
Who would you say your biggest support was if you had to choose one person?
I can't. I literally can't. I would
Top
say,
three.
I know. Okay, thank you. um, my husband. We met when I was 21. He was my first boyfriend, and he literally has been with me on this journey and been someone who's very confident in who he is, and communicating, and I'd say, just helped me to understand the importance of like having a voice, and knowing how to articulate yourself, and doing it in a way where people don't feel attacked, and they feel like you're having an open dialogue. But Susan Failtill, who was actually on the board of American Ballet Theater, a Black woman, having her kind of on that side of things, but Kevin really giving her permission, I guess, because it's a fine line between, donors and board of directors and the dancers, but he wanted her to feel comfortable in being kind of this, elder Black woman that could give me advice, having been on the inside of how, a ballet company works. She was a really big advocate for me, and helping me to kind of navigate as a Black woman in that space. And then Raven Wilkinson, who is a Black ballerina who danced for the Ballet Russe in Monte Carlo. And she was the only Black woman in the company in the 1950s. And then became one of my closest friends when I found out she lived a block away from me in New York City. And she passed away about 3 years ago now.
Mm.
Um, I just finished my next book, which is about her.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll definitely read it.
I'm so excited to share, it's her story and paralleled kind of with our story
Hmm.
together, but her influence in, knowing that she went through all that she did dancing in the South in the United States in the 1950s, the segregated South, and dealing with racism on a level that I could never imagine, and still seeing the beauty in what she did and pushing through to be a classical dancer is so incredibly admirable. But having her in my life personally, I'd say she's been like the person that gave me like a second wind to see that it wasn't about how old I was or following anyone else's journey and seeing these limitations, but knowing that I could make my career what I wanted to be.
Yeah. I think without our mentors, none of us would be where we are today.
Yeah.
And that it's so important to have a mentor if you don't have one.
Who are some of your mentors?
Oh, thanks for asking. For me, my parents, my mum was a huge support to me. Used to drive me to the Royal Ballet School at like 5 a.m. in the morning every day because I was a bit of a home girl and didn't want to board or anything.
Yeah, I get it.
And then I had this really important person in my life who also recently died. He was a ballet master of the Mariinsky and also a teacher at the Vaganova Academy. And he sort of discovered me in England. I was introduced to him when I was about 10. So I had a few classes with him, and then he helped me have an audition to get into the school. And then he became someone who would have me over on Sundays for dinner and things like that. So he felt like a sort of Russian dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he really helped me. And like before any performance or exam, he would like go like this. And I just,
Oh,
that
I
little
love
fist was
it.
just like, yes, I got this.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's
Yeah,
it's
you just
so
need that.
powerful. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and you never
amazing.
forget those things. I want to talk about another boundary that you've broken, which is also being accepted to have, a more athletic build. Um, and you have the most beautiful body. I just think it's absolutely stunning. And but that was a struggle for you, and you were told, as you put it, to lengthen.
Hmm.
And you struggled with puberty and then emotional eating. And I want to talk about this just because, again, I get a lot of messages from girls wanting help and guidance towards that because they have a lot of eating disorders or things like that. So um, tell us a bit about your struggle with that and also how you overcame that, because I think that's something that's really difficult to do once you're in that cycle.
Absolutely. It's kind of twofold, I think, with what my experience was. I think first it was being a ballet dancer and being a woman, being a young woman, going through puberty while I was dancing professionally, which a lot
Yeah,
of
it's tough.
dancers experience. And then on the other side of it, it was being a Black woman, where, so I'll start with the first, I'll start with
Okay.
the first part of that. It was really hard, again, not having a support around me when I was going through all of this. I mean, I didn't get my period until I was 19 years old, and I was already in the court of ballet. I think the first time I got my period was doing Swan Lake in the court of ballet,
And
wearing a
white
white,
tutu.
which was extremely traumatic.
God. Yeah.
And then from there, I ended up with a back injury, and the doctors attributed it to me not having started my period until later in life.
I actually had
No
the same
way.
injury as you. Oh my God. Back sisters.
Yeah.
I fractured my L3 in my lower back.
Yeah.
Did you? Was it the same?
It was, I can't remember exactly where, it was lower lumbar, but
Yeah. And I had low bone density because, again, I started my period really late. And so the strain of the work and then
yeah,
on this low bone density body, because I was basically like obviously not eating enough
right.
and I was a bit underweight,
Yeah.
and then I was obsessed with stretching my back, and like any dancer just kept stretching,
Yeah.
must
No.
get back flexible.
Right.
Yeah, and then obviously completely damaged myself.
I ended up with a stress fracture in my back, and I ended up taking a year off, and I wore a back brace. And this was my first year in the
Yeah,
company.
nightmare.
Devastating. It was devastating. But what the doctors did, they said, "Oh, well, why don't we put you on birth control and really get your period started and being regular." And again, this was over 20 years ago, so we didn't have it wasn't as regulated. So I went on birth control and I gained 10 pounds in like 2 months.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. So that was kind of the start of me just like feeling overwhelmed, and I went from being this prodigy and being ideal for ballet to all of a sudden, uh, you know, not ABT was kind of like, what do we do with you? And how do we support you? And I think things are a little different today, but back then, it was kind of like, oh, just go see this nutritionist. And it was like,
Yeah.
with what money? There wasn't a lot of support built in and like an infrastructure. And I think ballet companies need to do that, especially for young dancers. So, it just took time, and it was outside resources. It wasn't within the ABT where I kind of found this balance, but it was figuring out how to reassess what I was going through with the new body I was in, not trying to get back to the 19-year-old Misty pre-pubescent, not trying to have my body look like anyone around me, but what am I eating that is not serving my body? Treat my body with respect. It's an instrument that has to deliver a certain, level of physical, uh, you know, ability.
Yeah.
And so, but it was that on top of trying to decipher and understand how people talk about Black bodies and how they talk about Black women's bodies, which can be very negative and very nasty. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was, and I've had these conversations with Kevin McKenzie as well. When I look at my body, and I have a bigger bust and I'm more muscular, and I look at a Jillian Murphy's body who has a bigger bust and who is more muscular. And why aren't these negative attributes and these conversations being had with a white dancer who is similar in build? And so, it was really deciphering when you're being told you don't have the right body for ballet. For me, it was, you don't have the right skin color for ballet. That's what people mean. And so that became a bigger picture purpose for me. How do I change the language that's being used? How do I help to bring more diversity and inclusion into ballet? And so going through that experience at 19 years old, I think was like life-changing for me, because it just gave me more of an understanding of where the ballet world should be headed, and how you include more Black dancers and stop pigeonholing them by saying they don't have the right bodies, when a lot of them have the same bodies as other dancers in the company. So it just
Yeah.
opened up a bigger conversation for me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think, you're so strong because even, back then you made it uh, less about you and more about, the bigger picture,
I think
because
it's always
obviously,
easier to get through things. I think when you look at things that way, when you bring
yeah,
more people into the conversation, it's not just about you. It's easier to deal with things that are
yeah, I
hard.
think everyone should listen to that point because I think we're all too like
Right,
self-absorbed and like
right,
feel like we're completely alone in
right.
this. And it's like, no, there's definitely at least one other person
Yeah.
who's going through the exact same thing. Um, yeah, and that's yeah, really incredible. To talk about food a little bit, I wasn't even I never thought of myself as heavy at all, but once I was told to lose weight and told to be 50 kilograms at Vaganova, is by these very old-fashioned teachers, and I'm like nearly 5'11", and I was like 50 kilos, like, but I was like, okay, sure, no
Yeah.
problem. So then I became 51 kilos and obviously looked anorexic and looked completely hideous and had no strength, like could barely jump off the floor. And then they looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you? You look awful.
Right.
What have you been doing?" And I said, "I've literally just done what you
What you
told me to do," and um, that again just brings me to the point of, I know there's a lot of schools out there who, put dancers on the scale and want them to be weighed. And, what's your opinion of that? And do you think schools should be doing that? Or do you think, it should just be more about how they look and how they're performing?
absolutely think that is a horrible thing to be
Yeah.
doing. Again, like it's to compare people to that type of exact measurement, it's not realistic in any way. I mean, there are very thin girls that have more dense bones and that might weigh heavier than other people. Like, there's so many aspects to this that make it just not make any sense. And I feel like when you think about it and you think about dancers throughout history who have made an impact, like in ballet, that maybe don't all fit this mold, but they have done something that makes you feel it, it moves you. It's not about those things. It's about giving everyone an opportunity to see what's inside of them, to see what they can bring to the stage and make an audience feel. In the end, I think we lose sight of all of this.
Yeah.
In the end, like, that's what it's for. It's for people to come to the theater, to feel an escape, to feel moved, to see an artist on stage. In the end, it's about your artistry, and the technique plays a part in the artist that you are, but it's not about how long your tibia is and how big or small your head is. And I think that we just lose sight of all of that. And it's impossible to measure those things. And I think you'd be missing out on so much incredible talent that's out there.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to bring social media into this conversation now, because obviously, again, I'm sure maybe you too, you get a lot of messages from people constantly saying, but I'm never going to be good enough. There's this girl who's like, half my size and she's 9 and she's doing 20 pirouettes already. And, people get really overwhelmed. And to some degree, I'm so grateful that I did not have social media when I was training, because I think I would have just been obsessed with it. And I'm sure it's so difficult for young people now. But talking about the art and everything, it concerns me because, with the constant focus on tricks and comparison and everything, how can we advise young dancers to not lose the connection with the most important thing really behind ballet, which is the art and the artistry?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I'm just so thankful that I didn't grow up in that
Yeah.
time. But because we didn't, I think we have a different perspective and can give advice and support to dancers who have grown up in this world and it's all they know. But I think in the end, if you think about it even just really logically, and you look at these dancers and their pirouettes on or whatever it is, the strengthening and stretching that they're showing off on their social pages, that captures 30 seconds, 1 minute of something. And it's not about what it is you're working towards in this technique, and it's being able to have the stamina and the strength and the ability to tie these technical feats together. It's the transitions leading up to a pirouette or a jeté or an extension of a leg that make it dance. I think that when we just kind of isolate these things, it's no longer the art form that we're all a part of, and the beauty and what we enjoy. And so, what I say to dancers that I mentor is, and it's so much easier to say than it is to do, but just to not compare yourself to other people, because you're all on such a different journey. You have no idea what that dancer on the other side of that lens is going through when they're not doing their pirouettes that they've edited and put onto their page, the most perfect out of 30 takes they probably took, or whatever it is. There's so many things that you don't know that the other person's going through. And so it's really about putting the focus into yourself and your journey, and enjoying what you're doing, enjoying the process. Like, I think in the end, that's like most important. We give and sacrifice so much to be a part of this art form. And if you're not enjoying it, you know, people can see through that, whether it's the company you're auditioning for, the artistic staff, whoever it is, they can see the authenticity of a dancer who's really put in the work and is not just kind of imbalanced in their technique. Because once you go on stage, you're so vulnerable and you're so naked, and you have to be able to perform and tie all of these things together that make it dance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, sometimes, I'm flicking through Instagram and I see someone do 10 pirouettes, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's super impressive. Like, well done.
Yeah.
But then but then I watch someone, and this is why I just love, also why I went to Vaganova as well, because I fell in love with their expression and
Mhm.
how they express themselves. Like, they move an arm and a head, and I'm just like,
Wow.
just completely mesmerized.
Yeah.
And that's something, again, I just really try to translate to my students now, because obviously there's something within a dancer that, like, oh, she's got it, like,
Mhm.
she has it within her, but then there's a way to, like, bring that out. And
Right.
that's what they did for me, because
Yeah.
I was criticized for being very stiff
Okay.
in how I moved, and then they really taught me how to express. um but my point being, I don't really care if someone does 10 or someone does, 2 or 3. It's just like how they move, like you say, into the pirouette and out of it. Like, I think the in between steps and the expression behind it is what's most important.
I mean, I think again, like, we lose sight of what dance is, and it's storytelling. It's
Yeah.
storytelling through movement. So all of those things, all of those technical aspects serve a purpose. And I think that especially this generation, we get caught up in those things, and not really understanding what they're there for.
Yeah.
In all choreography, it's telling a part of the story.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about your stage life a little bit, because obviously dancer to dancer, we can talk about those things.
Yeah.
Um, how do you deal with nerves before you go on stage? I mean, do you get nervous at all?
I probably, the older I get, the more nervous I get. And
Oh,
I
that's
used
interesting. You would
I
think
used
it's the other way around.
to know. I would hear this a lot. Like, I remember when I first joined ABT, and I won't name the dancers, but watching them as they got older and being debilitated, not being able to go on stage and be as free as they once were. And I think it's, kind of the older you get, you have more perspective on, I guess, the weight
Mm,
of what it is you're doing. That when you're younger, you just kind of, maybe this isn't that way for every young person, but for me, I would just go out there and it was like so much fun. And you don't really understand, the pressures, I guess. But in general, I'm not someone who gets nervous when I perform. There are certain ballets that I think have more pressure built into them, like a Swan Lake, I would say, the biggest one for me. That, ballet mains, that they, expect a certain thing. And for me, it's kind of been reassessing and like going back and reminding myself, like I've been saying, like, what am I doing this for? And who
yeah.
is it really for? Um, but for me, I try not to make a shift in anything that I'm doing on a performance day that to make it any more special than a rehearsal day. Because what we forget is that on a daily basis, when we go into the studio and rehearse and we're preparing to go on stage for certain roles, we do it. We go out there and we just do it in rehearsal.
Yeah.
And so then we go on stage and we're like, wait, I don't know if I can do it. And it's like, well, yes, you can. You've been doing it. You've been doing it
Yeah.
every day for however long you've been preparing. And so I think with that mindset, it allows me to stay more grounded and not kind of get caught up in this whirlwind of expectation. So, in a performance day, like, I arrive, with the same amount of time I would if I were arriving to the studio to prepare for class.
Mm,
I like to go on stage and just kind of feel the energy before I go into hair and makeup or something. Like,
mm.
certain rituals, I guess
Yeah.
I have, but nothing that will kind of pull me, or, people have certain rituals where it's like, if I can't fit all of that in, oh my God, my whole day is ruined and my performance isn't going to go well. So I don't do anything like that. I make sure that they are, natural, organic things that, should be a part of preparing to perform. So yeah, it's breathing through things, keeping things as natural and grounded as possible, and reminding myself that I am prepared for this. That's what we do as classical dancers. We train our whole lives, we rehearse so that we can go on stage and rely on our body and our muscle memory to
Yeah.
do what we do.
I think, one thing that really helped me was I watched an interview once, and a dancer said, like, it's kind of, she would think about what she was going to do after the show. So she was like, I'm going to go home and have some sushi. And it's like, it just kind of really like dials down what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to do the show, no problem. And then go and have some sushi.
I love that.
And I'd be like, oh yeah, salmon skin roll.
Yeah.
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 So that really helped me, because I was just like an A1 worrier, a massive panicker.
Really? Oh,
Yeah. Even though I was like, I think I was suffering a lot with perfectionism, and,
of course.
it took me ages to accept, like, I know what I'm doing, for God's sake. Like, it doesn't matter if you're not feeling 100% or whatever, something happened that day. It's kind of that whole thing of one thing happens and you're like, oh my God, the world's
It's,
crushing down on me.
and I think
Um,
the beauty though of like live performance that I enjoy so much is that a lot of things are out of our control, like when it comes to, like, if you're dealing with a live orchestra and a conductor, that they're not going to always do exactly what you want.
no,
And
unfortunately not.
unfortunately not. And we've prepared ourselves in a way that you can adjust in the moment. I think you have to give yourself that freedom, and there's something about that that I really enjoy and that I love about live theater, is that we're technically, prepared to do what we need to do, but in general you have to have some flexibility. Something might go wrong with your partner and you have to be able to adjust in the moment. The tempo might be faster or slower than you want it to be, and I think there's something beautiful about that challenge.
I think it's learning to trust yourself, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which I guess comes with maturity as well. Um, I was going to talk about as well what happens when, dancers reach their sort of end goal. That might be the goal of, I've got to get into that company, or I've got to be a principal dancer. And I've noticed a lot of dancers like work so hard to get into their goals, and then they get their goal. Let's say they achieve becoming the principal. And then a lot of them think, okay, now what? And they
Right.
kind of like, okay, I've reached my goal, and they kind of lose, not everyone, but some people like really then lose motivation and lose the reason why they're doing this at all, because
Hmm.
they've kind of got their gold medal.
Right.
And what's your advice towards that? Because obviously you achieved becoming a principal dancer. And how did you feel when that happened? And did you stay motivated to just achieve more and more, or did you ever think, okay, now what?
It's I will speak from my experience, but I feel like um it's okay to uh to feel like you want to move on. I feel like people often, they set these goals and then it's kind of like they feel disappointed, like, oh well, I was expecting for it to be something else, or
Yeah.
I should keep doing this because I'm so fortunate to be in this position and hold this title. And um but it's okay to want to move on as well. But for me, again, like I said, I love being in the studio. I love the process. I love the challenge. And so even when I was I was in the court of ballet for 7 years before I was promoted, and I think I was a soloist for like 7 or 8 years before I was promoted to principal. So um I had to find joy in the work I was doing. I mean, I can't tell you how many peasant pas de deux I've done, or how many pas de trois in Swan Lake, or
Right.
and you have to find, well, for me, it's like I had to find new ways of interpreting a role or enjoying the process, to be happy, and I was happy to do that. And I think that's how I've I kind of stayed present and stayed grounded and stayed striving,
Yeah.
is enjoying the challenge. Like, we're not robots, so we can't just like program, like, our best performance, program it, save it, and then like that is what it is. Like, we're going to be dealing with something, our body going through something different every single day. One day you can do however many pirouettes, the next day maybe you can't. We're always striving for consistency, but you're not always going to be the same every day. And I think there's an incredible challenge in that. So for me, it's about, what's even more challenging is approaching the same role year after year and
Yeah.
making it better and making it different. And I think that's what's kept me, I don't know, striving, even when I'm in these places for many years at a time. But everyone's different. And I think that it's okay to feel that you feel like you've accomplished what you've wanted to accomplish.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting, and also really nice for you to say that to everyone as well. Because obviously, I think a lot of people feel pressure, and especially for, well, someone like me who has sort of removed myself a little, well, from the professional field. That was very, very, very difficult because you
Right.
feel pressure to continue, even though something inside you says, "I think I want to do something else now." Um, but again, I'm also trying to relay that message that it's okay if you want to do
Yes.
something different.
Yes.
Um, Now, when you became a principal dancer, and how did you find balance um, between maintaining that high status of a principal dancer and also pursuing all your other amazing projects that's happening? Like, do you find that enjoyable? Is it slightly stressful? How do you find that balance? Because you're doing so much, and it's kind of a lot you've got to take
Yeah.
on.
Um, I've, I don't have like a big team of people around me. I have a manager who I've worked with for almost 10 years now, and like her assistant. And I think people assume that I've got like this huge team of people, and we're all kind of like there's a lot going on. And in reality, I've made it very clear with my team of two women that ballet comes first.
Mm.
And if I say that I want things to be different, then they will be. But for now, that's where we start every conversation when it's something outside of my ballet career. So I think that's how I have found balance, is that everything revolves around what I'm doing at ABT. So nothing ever interferes with ballet class in the morning. Nothing ever interferes with any rehearsals or performance schedule. Everything has to be worked around when I'm available outside of that structure. And that's kind of kept my head on like straight.
Yeah.
But it's making sacrifice. There's no way around it. Like, doing all that I do is hard work and sacrifice. I think that a lot of the time people look at this like celebrity, or they look at the opportunities I have, but it's not something that's happened overnight. And there's a purpose behind it. My goal has always been to bring more diversity to ballet, to make it more accessible to more people. And then I worked backwards from there. But that was the first conversation I had with my manager, was what it is I wanted to do. And then from there, it was years and years of, waking up before ballet class, or getting up on my one day off and going to a public school and speaking to kids and showing them what's possible, seeing a Black woman that's doing something that's kind of breaking the mold of what we're told we can do. Those types of things, that's been year and year and year in and out of working towards, an Under Armour campaign,
Yeah.
or things that align with the messaging and what I stand for. So it's not just taking every opportunity, but it's work, and it's not just walking on a red carpet or doing this fabulous photo shoot. It's
No, I completely think it's down to sheer hard work that you've achieved what you have. And you have achieved it completely, and you're continuing to achieve it. And you've done so much for the ballet world. And, you're a huge, huge role model to so many dancers out there. And I think it's just absolutely amazing what you've done.
Thank you so
It's,
much.
yeah, really. As we're approaching the end of the interview, I asked a few of my students if they'd like to ask you anything, because I thought that
Yay.
would be quite cute.
Okay.
And one of my students asked, where do you get most of your creative inspiration from?
Oh, what a great
I
question.
know.
Oh my gosh, it comes from everywhere. Like I feel like when I was younger, music, it was music, like we started this
Yeah.
conversation, was such a big part of where I would find inspiration. I mean, you know, and it wasn't classical music. It was always, I don't know, whatever I could get my hands on, that was inspiring me. I think now it comes from, I don't know, my son that I just had three.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
It's from conversations that I have, like being exposed to more than just dance and ballet, but you know, different forms of art.
I think
Um,
that's a big one, actually, to interrupt you briefly, is because
yeah,
like a lot of dancers think, no, it's just ballet, 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 and they
yeah,
don't let themselves live. I mean, I definitely did that. And it's only now later, having a life outside, that I find that other things are much more interesting and the
yeah,
ballet's better and the inspiration's there
yes.
more. And, you know, I think a lot of young people need to take that message.
You completely, yes, nailed it. Exactly what I was trying to say. But I think that it's so hard for young people, I think, to understand and find the balance. But there's so much, it's so beneficial to live your life and experience other things. And I think that because I started dancing later, that I maybe had a different mentality, just from my life experiences. You know, when I moved to New York, I, in my mind, I thought, oh, this is such a diverse city. This will be amazing to experience. And then my days were spent 8 hours only surrounded by white dancers. And so my natural instinct was to say, I need to make friends outside of ballet, and I need to explore and be able to relate to other people who come from similar backgrounds or who look like me. And so I was exploring New York City from a young age, and going to concerts and art galleries and museums. And so I think that that is extremely beneficial, you know, to be able to develop as an individual and as a person, because that makes you a more interesting artist when you have real life experiences to pull from when you're portraying characters who have lived life.
Yeah, exactly. My Vaganova teacher always used to say to me, because I think she saw how like uptight I was and how serious. She was like, you know, are you going to a party later? Have you got a boyfriend? All that stuff. And I was like, no, of course not. I got to stretch tonight.
Those are the best teachers, though, that, you know, Irina Kolpakova,
Yeah,
New York Valley Theater, like she's not only an incredible coach, but she's amazing in that way, that she's, you know, it's like life is going to continue on after ballet, and it's about
exactly.
being happy. And you know, and so she, you know, she's someone that has an understanding of what that means. I mean, she was an incredible artist, and the importance of having that balance.
I think it leads to a lasting career. I think people who don't have that balance burn out quick.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'll give you one more question and then we'll finish.
Oh, the good.
At times when you felt unmotivated or overwhelmed before a performance, or even before a ballet class, were there specific thoughts you would always reflect on in order to push through and keep
Hmm.
pushing?
Thoughts. I mean, there's definitely, you know, breathing is such a big part of being able to like find your center again, that I do, whether it's before a class or before I step onto stage.
Mm.
That really centers me. But I often think about like Raven Wilkinson, who's, you know, my mentor. And when I'm having like a hard day, and I think like what a hard day was like for her,
Yeah,
and that like if she could persevere and succeed with all of the setbacks that she had, like I can get through this.
yeah,
And I think it kind of puts things into perspective, and allows you to see that you're not alone. things aren't as difficult as you may think they are, there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
I think throughout our conversation, I've noticed there's a sort of pattern with how you've gotten through a lot of things. And I think you've managed to sort of either think about somebody else or remove. It's not about you. What you're going through, and think about other people. So, if you're nervous, think about the people watching, like what are you giving them, and thinking about someone else suffering out there, you need to help them in order to so I think that's something that we could all take away from this main conversation, is that don't focus so much on yourself and think outside, and what's the bigger picture here and the bigger purpose.
Yeah, we're not in this alone, and there have been so many people that have done it before us and experienced similar things.
Exactly. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Misty. It's been a huge honor to speak with you today, and I'm just so thrilled you agreed to come on the podcast and speak with me. You're an inspiring woman, and also inspiring to me, because you're not only a principal dancer, but you're also a successful mentor to so many dancers, and public figure out there, and which is what this world needs. So once again, thank you so much, and I'm sure the listeners at home have loved this conversation, and thank you.
So much for having me.
So guys, I hope you found that as inspiring as I did. What a huge honor speaking with Misty Copeland, and I hope you've taken something away from that conversation. Please get in touch with me if you resonated with that, and once again, thank you so much. If you're new here to A Dancer's Mindset, welcome. We're all about helping young dancers bring more awareness to our feelings and how to be as successful as possible in this industry, because as we all know, ballet is really, really difficult, and speaking with people as incredible as Misty really just helps more and more people. So thank you so much for listening or watching, and bye for now.